Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate your time, effort, and curiosity in learning something new. Today, we'll be talking about words matter, how we use them affects youth. And this is by prevention educator Ruth Delpino, aka myself. I always start my presentations with who I am, just because I feel like that's a necessary part to understand what the baseline looks like and where we're coming from in the upcoming slides. Um, Hello, my name is Ruth Delpino. I'm a prevention educator. I am the Mercer County Grant Program Coordinator. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Global Studies, Political Science, and American Studies. I'm certified in teaching English as a foreign language, life skills training, and leadership. And I'm really excited because all my certifications are going to come into play in this presentation. So I'm very excited to get into it. Also, why this presentation? I always start with this as well, just because I want to put it out there that this is not to scare you. This is to inform you. This is also not to parent in class. You are the best parent for your child. You know them the best. And my perspective is shaped by my approach and by my learning experiences. And by that, I mean, as a prevention educator and as a program coordinator, you sort of navigate through different resources that are given to us. And I take those resources, I take those pieces of empirical evidence, and then I put them in the presentation so that you can make your own inferences about what that material suggests. Also, this is evidence informed and some evidence based. And what I mean by that is evidence informed, as in the programs that we do at the Mercer Council, such as Life Skills, Too Good for Drugs, Footprint, Parents Who Host, those sorts of things will always influence our presentations because that's the baseline for what we're doing. And some evidence-based, meaning that I will bring in studies, I will bring in other pieces of empirical evidence so that you can look at your own discretion. All right. So I do want to talk about words being labels. And when we sort of talk about words being labels, a lot of people don't realize that labels are words. And in that, what I mean is when we speak, we think that it's just a sentence with a bunch of words strung together, but labels are words that have a very specific poignant meaning. And there are different parts of that that I wanted to address before we move on. Words can be labels for ethnic/cultural identities. I do a great presentation on the First Nation and Native Americans and substance use disorders. It can also be for, also it can be for Asian American and Pacific Islander people as well. Any ethnic and cultural identity. It can be for sexual identity, which I've done a presentation on, gender identity, which I've also done a presentation on, ability or disability, which I sort of have done on autism and substance use disorders, as well as physical and non-physical attributes. Any sort of thing that people have or that they sort of identify with, these are the things that are considered labels. And there is a difference between having a label and having one given to you. So labels can be helpful because it helps us understand how to interact with that person or that thing or that scenario, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that person themselves that's in that situation identifies as that label. So it's always important for us to recognize and understand that different people have different meanings and give different meanings to words in their lives and the way that they interact with the world around them. So, and also to understand that words are important, labels are important, because without it, there would be no implicated social rules. So this is not to deconstruct words and say that they have no meaning. It's to say that words have so much meaning that we are able to use them in a way that can harm or help youth. All right, so I found this great quote, and I just wanted to put it in there, one, because it sounds cool, but two, because it is something that I find really interesting that a lot of people don't think about very critically sometimes. And it says, language provides the rails on which thoughts ride, sorry. So when we're sort of talking about this, people ask, what is language? What are words? And this is actually an excerpt that I found from a TED Talk. It was actually on a Christian website, so there is some connotation to the material, but it was done by biologist Dr. Mark Pagel, and he speaks of potency of words and using memorable phrases, explaining that through language, and I want to read this because I don't want to paraphrase, we are able to implant our ideas into another person's mind. Language provides the rails on which thoughts ride. The words we use and how we use them matter immensely because they shape the way we perceive the world and participate within it. So I just wanted to say that when we are looking at words and we are looking at language, the implicated social roles tell us how we can interact with that person, that thing, or that idea. And there is another interesting site that I found. This is actually a Hindu site, and it's called thehindu.com. And this is an opinion piece on why language matters. And what they had stated was, since thousands of languages exist and are nourished by its speakers, different linguistic vocabularies imply different ways of constituting and experiencing the world, each having different feelings, concerns, sensibilities, aspirations, and so on. Language makes us what we are. Specific languages make us the specific creatures that we are. Now, I find that fascinating for a lot of different reasons. And I don't want people to have a lot of realizations about how words mean nothing, but it is to say that the words that we have a lot of connotation. And to sort of piggyback off that, that connotation is a lot of people sort of mix connotation with different words, right? But connotation means a tone or a way in which something is framed. And a change of words can change the framework. So actually in life skills training, when I'm working with my adolescents, we do a lot of frameworking and reframing, especially in situations where they feel out of control. And those reframings and that framework is always centered around the words that they use to affirm and confirm their identities and themselves and the people around them. So that is something to keep in mind as we're moving forward, and we will touch upon that later. Also, to understand that formation of words, and I'm just going to put in my own 2 cents here because I really wanted to talk about this, that formation of words is definitely a cultural thing. Plural versus non-plural, adjective first versus noun first. So when we are actually looking at Thai, what I did want to say is that in Thai specifically, there is no such thing as a plural, meaning that if you are to speak, there's no word that has a plural at the end of it. A lot of Asian languages actually do not carry plural. So when you're saying 2 cars, it translates to 2 car. If you're saying 3 butterflies, it translates to 3 butterfly. There's no word that has any implication of plural, only the number in front of it tells us how many there are. So I find that fascinating for a lot of different reasons, but for also for us to understand that our way of thinking actually is influenced by the formation of our language. And also in Spanish, when we're talking about adjectives, nouns, and putting subjects, direct object, things like that, the noun in Spanish is always mentioned first. So for example, if we were to say red cars, you actually say carros rojos, because car is more important than the adjective. The noun is more important than the adjective in this scenario. Now in English, we already know that the noun comes first. So these are a lot of different areas in which we can sort of understand that cultural context and the languages we use actually implicate the importance of the people around us and how we treat them. So I just find that really interesting as well. Also, understand that words carry history. There are a lot of different ways that they carry history, but this is one really quick example. Specifically Indian versus First Nation / Native American peoples. And we already know that First Nation peoples aren't necessarily Indians, but sometimes people use that as a phrase because of the implications of Christopher Columbus landing on an area that he thought was India and calling the natives there Indians. So we'll be talking more about that later on as well. Once again, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, or would like to react to anything, you could definitely put it in the chat and we can move forward from there. Also, know that when we're interacting, language is important for a lot of different reasons. And I always struggle with person first language and adjective first language. So when I am looking at something, for example, and I see disabled person, is it more correct to say person with a disability? And I've really struggled with this because I always want to make sure that people feel included, that they feel heard, that they feel seen. And there are a lot of different ways we can do that. But for us to understand that talking to different people of different communities means different things. And the reason why it's not so simple is because people are complicated. complicated. People are interesting and complex, and there are so many different ways and labels that these people have that we can't necessarily completely understand all the time, and that's okay. So, but I did want to say, when we are talking about substance use disorders and things like that specifically, I have a video on that, and it will start now.
Words can become grenades, strategically spoken at times to do the most damage. And when those words come from family and friends, they cut deeper. Labels erased my humanity. Total strangers felt allowed to criticize or judge me, saying that I was just a drunk or addict. These words also carried the connotation that I was lazy, selfish, or criminal. After a while, I began to believe the words, concluding I no longer served a purpose or deserved hope. Luckily for me, these feelings were eventually replaced with words that provided healing.
The research is clear. Not only do words shape how we view people, but words also shape how we treat them. For example, studies show that when someone is described as an abuser or addict, the general public and even clinicians are more likely to believe that they should receive punishment over treatment. Tragically, for those with addiction who are looking to lead fulfilling lives, hearing the terms drug abuse or addict is paralyzing and demotivating. It blames people for their own illness, ignoring environmental and genetic factors. It feeds into the stigma they experience from society, their family, and treatment providers. To help decrease stigma around language, the Office of National Drug Control Policy recommends using person-first language to replace judgmental and negative terms. For example, a person with a chronic medical illness that impacts their brain is not an abuser or an addict. They are John with a substance use disorder. John, a person who requires treatment and support to recover from his illness. Words matter. They can hurt and reduce someone's motivation.
Together, let's choose supportive, non-judgmental words that lead to treating people with respect and compassion.
Okay. So I really like that video for a lot of different reasons, but I find it's just a good video for us to sort of take heed on the way that we talk about a lot of different populations. And yes, this is specifically for people with substance use disorders, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't apply to different areas of life and different communities. What I do have to say is, oh, we have something in the chat. Oh, we have a question. So would labeling someone make it a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing? Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that is something to address. And that's a great question. So in some ways, yes. So if we were to talk to someone as if they are that thing, eventually there are a lot of studies that show that person tends to believe it. So if that person is no good, if that person is not good at school, they're dumb, they're stupid, excuse the connotations there, but those are the sorts of things that we're looking at here. When we call people certain things, then we are implicating what we think their worth is. And so when we do that, we are not giving them the most inclusive way of finding their own resources and making sure that they have the best fulfilling life. So yes, in some ways, it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy because we give words to things and then we constantly repeat them throughout culture, and it eventually becomes that thing. So in some ways, absolutely. And what I would also say is that there are a lot of different communities that prefer a lot of different things. I know, for example, someone who I had talked to who had autism said that he doesn't mind being called autistic versus a person with autism because his diagnosis of autism is a huge part of who he is. So he actually prefers being called an autistic person versus a person with autism. That doesn't mean it's everyone. That doesn't mean that we can just, make those assumptions. But I think that what really matters is that when we are looking at identities and interacting with people and describing others, then we ask them what they prefer first. And that's really the best way to put it, that some people just prefer different things, and that's okay. And in order for us to be a more inclusive world and a more inclusive place, then we should follow their wishes and understand what that means to them. If you have any questions, once again, you can put them in the chat. All right, here we go. Oh, my apologies. So also, what I found really interesting is that especially when we're interacting with youth and people who are younger, is to understand that words are developmental, that they are things that help brains form. They are things that help synapses come together. There are things that help us think critically. And when we're sort of looking at this, there are a lot of different connotations to words. And so I actually found quite a few different articles. I just put a few that I thought were very easy to read. Um, WebMD is definitely one of them. And I know that this is a place where people go to diagnose themselves, but they have quite a few different articles on developmental abilities and developmentalism and things like that. So I actually put it in there because I thought it was interesting. And they quoted quite a few different people, especially this person named Joseph Schrand. He has a PhD in psychiatry and developmental psychiatry specifically. And he basically says, stop yelling at your kids. And what I find interesting about that is, okay, words matter, but also the way we deliver them matters. So he says yelling versus phrasing is definitely an important part of this. And what he says is, as soon as you begin to raise your voice, you activate their limbic system, which is an ancient part of our brain that's responsible for, among other things, fight or flight or freeze response. This results may be the opposite of what you're hoping for, as your kids will freeze up, fight back, or run away. And so that is something to keep in mind as we are interacting, especially with younger kids, that yelling doesn't necessarily make things go away. In fact, they don't connect the words to the tone. They just listen to the tone. So if the tone is in a way that is aggressive or loud or something that may scare them, then they don't want to be a part of it. They decide that they're like, oh no, this can hurt me, or this is something that's not okay. So yelling is definitely different. So when we're interacting with children, the best way to do it is to phrase something, calm them down, get them at their eye level, and then talk to them through that. Um, Also, I find it really interesting that there was another article on here that I find really fascinating, weforum.org. And I was going to click on it very quickly. One, because look at that picture, adorable. But two, there are a lot of different studies that were cited in this article that I will not be referencing here, but are great on their own time. MIT actually did, cognitive scientists at MIT did quite a few different studies on children and the way that we talk to them. And really what they found is that it can boost the child's brain development and language skills, and measured by a range of tests on MRI brain scans. And this is the case regardless of parental income or education. So meaning that if we are to talk to our children, if we are to look at them and say, I'm going to talk to you age appropriately and talk to you about different things and reaffirm your identity, then it actually changes the formation of the brain of the child. And that is regardless of income or education, or parental income or education. So I found that very exciting because, one, it shows that development of the brain is egalitarian. It's not something that is mitigated through anything. It's just something that exists. And if we treat our children in a way that is respectful and talks to them in a very interesting but also developmentally honoring way, then they can actually have some really good experiences, and their brain can be developed in a way that it may not otherwise. And this is also just another link to that as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. But I do want to say in this article, verywellfamily.com, I do actually use them a lot as a resource because they have great blogs, great resources, and a lot of empirical evidence on the claims that they make. They actually did quite a few studies, and they said research shows that yelling can be as harmful as aggressive discipline. Sure, your child may listen in the short term, but if you want your child to develop the skills he needs to regulate his own behavior, speaking nicely is clearly the better way to go. So that is something to keep in mind as well, that aggressive discipline and yelling in their own right can be hand in hand and can be retroactive to the child's development. So how can we teach children word choice matters? And word choice is important. So there are a lot of different ways. Once again, I also did verywellmind.com, which is actually a sister organization to Very Well Family. And they talk about reframing. And I'm just going to click on them quickly because I think that they break it down quite nicely. But cognitive reframing, they do techniques, They also do what cognitive reframing can help with and the benefits of cognitive reframing, as well as the effectiveness. And also things to consider while you're going through reframing as well. So there are quite a few different ways that we can do this. And I think that it's important for us to do this because one, it is something that children need, but also it is something that we teach to our youth, especially in life skills, where we're talking about reframing. And what reframing is it's looking at a situation and it says, all right, it can be this way. This situation is hard to deal with. It's hard to interact with. It's hard to wrap my mind around. How can I actually take this situation and then look at it differently? And most of the time, if not all of the time, word choice is the best way to do that. So if you say, oh, I'm so lazy today, well, instead you can say, I didn't get a lot done today, but I can also get more done tomorrow. So there are different ways to reframe. Reframing can also be a coping skill, because if we are in a situation that we feel we cannot change, reframing is a great part of that, especially when you have children that are in situations that may be harmful or are hard to deal with. Reframing can really help them understand what that actually means and how they can interact with it. Also, when you are reframing, it sort of takes away from the disaster making aspect of it. I know, for example, my niece who is 10 can go 0 to 100 very quickly, especially when there are certain things or certain areas of her needs that aren't being met. So when the disaster making starts to happen, when the buildup starts to happen, when the panic starts to set in, reframing is an important part of that process so it can mitigate any of the very aggressive visceral responses that children may have. Also, when we are sort of talking about children and how word choice is important, I want especially educators to open up spaces for children to express themselves in a lot of different ways. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to keep talking and talk and sort of deconstruct the word choice that they're using. It's just saying that give them opportunities to interact with other children, give them opportunities to write things down, give them opportunities to practice their language, which is why language arts and English class in general can be so helpful to people that are struggling with any sort of thing, whether it's substance use disorder, mental health, or any other debilitating thing. So also let them know the power of words and language. And that is a really important thing that we're going to allude to later on. But it is something really important for us to realize that the power of words and language actually implicates what children think of themselves and each other. And also know that the power of words isn't just in speaking, it isn't just in interacting with someone else. It's also writing things down and then using those words as a change for good or as a change for something out of their situation. So I did want to put this here because one, I thought it was cute. It's a really great YouTube channel. They're called Soul Pancake, and they do, if you've ever seen Kid President, they also do Kid Congress, and I believe they also do quite a few different things on children meeting people of different realities. So here we go.
You're a world changer, Layla. You matter, Layla. You owe me $2. That's from my cousin. There are like 7.4 billion humans on planet Earth. About 1.8 billion are younger than 18. They're teaming up to seek good, create good, and celebrate good. Together. Kid Congress is now in session. When we're very little, we start to learn the alphabet. And then we learn to combine the letters to make words. We can spell words like yes, no, love, eat, doorknob. Not necessarily in that order, but then you can start combining those words into sentences. You can combine words to say things that are helpful or hurtful. I'm gonna tell you a true story. It's about a brave, kind girl who used her words good. Sorry, I'm just a kid. The year was 1982. There was a young girl named Samantha Smith. She heard some things in the news that she did not like. It was a scary time. One day, Samantha heard some things that were really tense between the United States and the Soviet Union. They were calling it the Cold War. There were popsicles. Wait, you don't need popsicles when you're cold. There was hot cocoa. One day, Samantha saw an issue of a magazine, and on the cover there was the Soviet leader And it made her ask her mom, if people are so afraid of him, why doesn't someone write a letter? A letter asking whether he wants a war or not. So Samantha got out some pencils and paper and wrote a letter. Dear Mr. Andropuff, my name is Samantha Smith. I am 10 years old. Congratulations on your new job. She said that she felt like the world was made for everyone in it, for everybody to share it and take care of. She went to the post office and she put it in the mailbox. I hope you find Mr. Andropuff. 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 Days passed and she did not get a reply. She just sat and waited and waited and waited and waited. Something big did happen though. A Soviet newspaper published her letter. Her letter! The letter she wrote. Pretty soon after, she got a response in her own mailbox. Dear Samantha, it seems to me, I can tell by your letter, that you are courageous and honest girl. He then let her know that he did not want a war. Just like her, he wanted peace too. Then something really huge happened. He invited Samantha and her family to come and visit. In the Soviet Union, everyone is for peace and friendship. I wish you all the best in your young life. And that's the actual letter she got in her mail. But he probably said it in a better accent than I did. Samantha and everybody jumped up and down because they were so happy. Some of them were even doing the floss dance, and they ate corn dogs. I made that part about corn dogs up, but they possibly could have. And there was world peace. Just like that. I gotta fix my set. Just a few years ago, she was given an honor, the Peace Abbey Courage of Conscience Award, for helping to bring about a better understanding between the peoples of the USA and the USR. And as a result, reduced the tension between the superpowers. Just little words she wrote on paper led to all of that. Words matter, and words matter. I want to challenge every person watching this, every kid and former kid, to write a letter. Maybe it's to a teacher you love, a friend you care about, or someone you'd like to encourage, and send them a taco with it. And we can all put our nouns and verbs and adjectives and adverbs. We can put them all together and blast out hope into the world. I like to close with two very important words. Dance, party.
Okay, they spend the rest of the video dancing. It is very adorable in a lot of different ways, but what I do want to say about this is that this video shows that when we are using words in a way with good intention, it can lead to very good things. And I sort of want to look at it as the context, sentiment, and intentions of words are always important, but the connotation of those words is the package. So the words that we use and the way that we package them can be a truly important part of an interaction because it shows our intention, it shows how we respect the other person. So I thought that was really cool and a really good video. And the YouTube channel is called Soul Pancake, and I will leave links to them in the description below if you're watching this on the YouTube channel for a lot of different reasons, but it is a very good resource. All right, give me a second. So I'm going to sort of shift gears for a second. And there is some mention of suicidal ideation. I just want to put this in here now. If you're watching this on the YouTube video, I will give you a time skip ahead so that in case you don't want to listen to this or are triggered by it, we can do so. But for the people that are here, I do want to talk about a few different things. Now, the pnas.org, I'm so sorry, I think it's pronoun usage, my apologies, pronoun PNAS. It's a very long name, but basically what they do is they do a lot of surveys, and they're an organization that looks at the formation of words and how they matter to different populations. And one thing that they did was they did 3 survey experiments on gender neutral pronoun usage in business settings. And what they had found is that there was actually a shift in associated with people expressing less bias in favor of traditional gender roles and categories, as manifested in more positive attitudes towards women and LGBT individuals in public affairs and business settings. So what they had found was that the language that had eventually changed or shifted in culture actually shaped the way people look in business settings, and also to understand that the framework for it was already set so that there were a lot of policies in place that sort of mitigated any of those hard responses that people may have, and to also say that there was policy in place to make sure that these people who are LGBTQI+ were protected. There was also a study that I actually used this study in my last presentation, but I think it's really interesting and something for us to look at again, is that they looked at 129 transgender and non-binary youth or gender non-conforming youth. And what they had found was that in different settings, this was based in 3 major cities. They followed 3 major cities, 129 students of people who were experiencing life in a way that may not necessarily be ideal for their situation. But what they had found was, even with one mitigating risk factor, that their pronouns and their chosen names were used, there was a 29% decrease in suicidal ideation and a 56% decrease in suicidal behavior. Now, those are amazing numbers for a lot of different reasons, because one, it shows that even if everything else goes wrong, if their chosen names are pronouns and pronouns are respected, there is something that can actually be a saving grace to them. It can actually save actual lives. So the pronouns and chosen name usage are a really important part of words mattering, because the words that matter to them are the words that could actually save lives. And I think that is something that a lot of people should take heed on and remind themselves of, that if someone asks you to use a pronoun or use a name that matters more to them, then I think that the least we can do is do that, because we don't know what their situations are. We don't know what they're going through. And it's just easier and more kind to do so. If anybody has any responses to anything, remember, you can put them in the chat as we go through. Also, understand that history lies within our words. And what I mean by this is, it's a sign of cultural competency. I found this great article on plu.edu, and it's basically, words mean things. And they have a great way of doing this. And especially because there are a lot of organizations that are seeking to be anti-racist and more culturally competent, this is a great resource for this. So, my language, my choice. And what they say is, we choose the words we use to communicate with others, intentionally or unintentionally. The words we choose can have a negative impact on others. They can be experienced differently given context. We must have the courage to learn in public. And so there are a lot of different ways that we can do that. How to be anti-racist, looking at anti-Blackness, looking at the decolonization movement, and also looking at the different ways that we can help Black, Indigenous people of color, which also is known as BIPOC, which I find a very cool acronym to say out loud. So these are great things that we can look through. Lots of resources, definitely a lot of videos, studies also cited on here. So I thought it was really interesting, but also something that we could keep in mind, that when we are using certain phrases, we are implicating what we know and who we are. So I also want to talk about BIPOC, people of color. When we say things like minorities, First Nation, etc., those also have implications to it. And I, up until recently, didn't really know that master bedroom was something that is actually a remnant of enslavement times, where the master bedroom was a place where the masters, their slave masters of the house, resided and slept. So this is something that is just in culture, in the way that we talk, in the way that we speak. And oh, we have something in video. Yeah, so yes, master bedroom. It's something so interesting, because history lies within everything that we're talking about. And when we sort of use these words and decide that we're going to keep using these words, then it carries on the meaning. And sometimes it gets lost in translation or lost through time. But it is still something important to know, that when we use words, they come from places that may not necessarily be very easy to hear or easy to interact with or easy to learn about. But these are things that we must know if we're going to keep using them, because words and their implications definitely matter. And especially the way that it's woven in public, woven in the way we use public words. So also, this is a great video on First Nations and how youth see themselves. I actually used this video in my First Nation presentation on First Nation substance use disorders. But I did want to say that there is this one section of a Looney Tunes reference where this man basically says, especially in Looney Tunes, there are a lot of Native Americans that are depicted in a way that where they don't say a lot of words, where they happen to be really red-faced, or they happen to be yielding a lot of weapons. And what he basically says is, this may be harmless to a lot of different people. This may be harmless in that it's just good fun. It's just something that is. But also to understand that when we see Native American people represented in pop culture like this, it gives people permission to have these implications and these biases towards First Nation people, and that video implicates that Native Americans don't necessarily, they're not intelligent, they're much more savage-like, things like that. So I think that there's a lot of context to that. And for us to understand, especially as educators and people that work with youth in general, that what we present and how we present it really matters to the youth in the classroom or in whatever setting you're in at the time. Also, if you are looking to be much more inclusive in the way that you say words. Here are 19 anti-racist phrases, as well as gender neutral phrases that take into account gender, identity, sexuality, things like that. So a lot of different ways we can do this, oh, my apologies. I have the insider thing, but not everyone does. But the rest of the article is written out, and I still will have the link below for it. All right. Here we go. Moving on. So I think that a lot of people wonder, how can we help, right? And it can be hard because there are a lot of different ways that people think they can help, that people want to help. And it's really to understand that listen to children when they say something. If they say they don't like it, if they say they don't realize, or if they are saying something that really matters to them, listen to them, because they are the ones experiencing their lives. We don't know what they're going through. There are things that children hide from us. There are things that we only see because we want to see them. And to understand that children and youth have experiences that we cannot protect them from, and they have realities that we can't protect them from either. So to understand that when we listen to them, that's a mitigating factor in the first place. Also, to lead by example, basically when we're saying word choice, when we're saying things in front of them, to understand that they are absorbing that information, that children are socialized by other children, but they are definitely socialized by the adults in their lives, because we're the ones that have the knowledge, we're the ones that have the learned experiences, we're the ones that have been through it before, and tell them what to do in case they're sad or in case they're upset or don't know how to do something. We're the ones. So definitely leading by example is a huge part of that as well. And also having materials and resources on hand so that given the time, if people have any questions, we have at least something to give them so that they can sort of kickstart their journey on what they want to say and how they want to say it. Also, let people know if what they are saying may be harmful to youth. For example, if you're using a derogatory term for gender identity, making sure that that person that uses it does not use it in front of youth, and shouldn't be using it in general, but definitely does not use it in front of an adolescent by any means, because it is harmful, because it does show the connotation of that person's thinking, the connotation of what they think about that population. So that is something that is really important as well, to also call people out when they say something. Words are just words, but they are implications of sentiment so much deeper. And if we don't address them, then it can be very harmful to a lot of different populations. So if we have the power to intervene, then we should. Also, be intentional, but also gracious to your learning process. Know that you're not going to say everything perfectly, that you're not going to say things in the right way all the time, but know that if you are intentional, if there is graciousness behind it, if there is mercy and forgiveness and kindness in every word that we interact with youth with, then we can definitely satiate a lot of those worries around interacting with their own environment, that we are to create safe spaces for them to be themselves and be authentic and experience their lives in a way that's not necessarily harmful to them or anyone else. So that's what I have to say about that. If you have any other suggestions, you can definitely put them in the chat as we move forward. I just have one more slide and then we'll be done with the presentation. But if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. So I have a quote to end on because I always end my presentations with quotes, but also something that I wanted to say is that words, oh, and this is by Philip Zaleski, who is actually part of a writing team that did biographies on J.R. Tolkien. And if anyone doesn't know who J.R. Tolkien is, he's someone who wrote the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but also he is someone who talked a lot about his wartime experiences in Lord of the Rings and outside of it. And he was a big proprietor of giving resources to veterans when he was alive. So words are catch basins of experience, fingerprints and footprints of the past that the literary detective may scrutinize in order to sleuth out the history of human consciousness. And essentially what that means and what we can sort of conglomerate into a nutshell is words make us. When they are given meaning and we all understand what they are, they over time let people know where we've been, what we can be, and how long we've been this way. Especially in an age of information at our fingertips, we have no excuse not to know the best things to say. And it is our duty to do the work to help youth make meaning on their own words and to interact with them in a way that makes them feel safe and authenticated and validated. That's all I have to say on words matter. But once again, thank you for being here. Thank you for everything in general. We appreciate the context. And next week, we'll be talking about interacting with low vision populations and substance use disorders. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your time.